Yo, 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 I am back once again with another video, man. I wanted to make this, quick little video about Avatar for a second because, as you all know, the movie is coming out in the next few weeks, maybe about like, 3 weeks from now, I should say. So it's steadily approaching, man. So, this movie is probably, I guess you could say, one of the biggest movies of the year. I guess you could say that. But I wanted to talk about something that I found very interesting. Now, when I first found out about this, I didn't really believe it. I thought that this was kind of like, I don't know, like misinformation or people just spreading around some kind of rumor. But, you know, when I looked into it a little bit deeper, it's actually, quite true, which is that Avatar, the sequel, will have to make at least $2 billion to break even. Let me say that one more time because that's a pretty astonishing. Avatar Way of the Water will have to make at least $2 billion just to break even. Not make profit, to just break even. And just like thinking about that is kind of like mind blowing to me, because, 2 billion, not a lot of movies reach that mark. You know what I mean? There's only very few movies that has crossed over the $2 billion, gross margin. And for a movie to have such a high budget to where you have to make that much money in the box office just to break even, just goes to show, man, that I think they're really banking too high on Avatar. I think the makers, James Cameron, whoever you want to blame, I think they're setting this movie up for failure. Going back to like the first Avatar movie, when that movie first came out, it was definitely a hyped movie, but the reason why it was hyped was because of the special effects. I feel that out of all the movies that you see in the top 5 or in the top 10 of like highest box office gross, I really do feel like Avatar is probably the only movie on that list that was solely hyped up by Hollywood. When you look at other films that's on that top 10 list, when you look at films like, Titanic and Avengers Endgame and, Spider-Man No Way Home, people love those movies because of the story of itself, characters, you could talk to fans of those particular movies and they could, recite certain scenes, just off rip, you know what I mean? There were a lot of things within those movies that people remember, and they will remember forever. There were a lot of memes created from those movies. Like I said, memorable scenes, memorable characters, memorable moments in those particular movies. However, when you look at Avatar, especially the first one, I mean, most people, or when you just go around in general and see like the general discussions about just Avatar in general, nobody could really tell you a memorable scene from that movie. Nobody could tell you any of the names of the characters. In fact, when the movie first came out, people were not really praising the movie like that. People were more so talking about the special effects. And then most people were like, yeah, this movie is like overrated and, it's a Dancing of the Wolves ripoff. That was like the main gripe with a lot of people with that movie was that particular movie, Avatar, the first one, was basically a basic ripoff of another movie. It just had pretty special effects, and that was pretty much it. So for James Cameron, to demand such a high amount on the budget for this sequel and the series of sequels, I'm pretty sure that the next few sequels that's going to come out is probably going to be as much as what this new sequel is, as far as like, okay, how much it took to make it. And I just feel like they're kind of like banking heavily on just like the success of the first film. But like I said, when you really take a deeper look into the Avatar film and what made that film successful, I really do believe that it had the Hollywood machine like solely behind it. That movie was pumped more so by Hollywood than the fans. Like I said before, when you look at other films like Endgame and No Way Home and Titanic, those movies had, you know, a big fan base, you know what I mean? And when you talk to those fans and when you just talk about that movie in general, there's just scenes that just pop out of you. There's just so much memorable scenes from those particular movies that you could just recite and you could talk about the characters. But like I said, when we talk about Avatar, that's not the case. You know, Avatar was kind of like a one trick pony to where all it had was its special effects. And at best, when you take the special effects away, it was just a bland, mediocre movie. It didn't really have that much of a memorable cast of characters, except, I guess you could say, the Na'vi tribe. That was basically about it. But everything about Avatar is just special effects, you know? And even with this new sequel, you know, you have people that saying, hey, I still don't know what this movie is about. I don't know what this movie is going to be about. Even from the trailers, like, I'm having a hard time judging what the movie is going to be about. So it's kind of like this movie is like doomed to fail almost, because this movie almost has to perform perfect in all aspects, you know, just to reach that $2 billion mark. You know what I mean? Because it's coming from a movie that was just heavily praised solely off of the special effects alone. You know what I mean? So with this sequel, it has a lot. It's like it's going up against a lot. And the reason why it's going up against a lot is not so much of the fans' expectation. It's more so of what, you know, James Cameron, you know, put into it as far as like the demands, as far as like, okay, I want this high of a budget of a movie. You know, you kind of like put your own foot in your own grave. You dug yourself a hole. And I really feel that, you know, Avatar, the Way of the Water is probably going to be, I mean, I don't know how the movie's going to turn out. It's going to be very interesting to see how this movie's going to turn out. But for this movie to reach that high of a mark, as far as like the $2 billion mark, just to break even, you're asking for a little bit too much. You're asking a little bit too much of this movie. Because like I said, this movie better make damn sure that it hits on all fronts. It can't, like, it has no room to fail. It has no room for error. You know, the special effects has to be more on point. It has to be on par with the first one at the very least. Matter of fact, you should probably expect a little bit better, because the first film set a way higher boundary for the special effects, because that's what drives this movie. So even with the special effects, I don't think you shouldn't even expect it to be on par of it. That should be like the bare minimum as far as like what to expect with this film. It should surpass, you know, in special effects, even on that particular forefront. So that's not even mentioning the characters. That's not even mentioning the story. You know what I mean? That's not even mentioning the plot, any of that. You got to make sure first and foremost that the special effects in and of itself is at least, you know, a little bit above than what the first one was. So imagine that, you know what I mean? And now you're talking about story and characters. You really think that Avatar is going to deliver on all fronts to make a $2 billion box office gross? I highly doubt it. I just can't see it. I could see them making $1 billion easy. Yeah, definitely. I could see them making $1 billion easy. Well, I shouldn't say easy. I could see them making $1 billion, a little bit over $1 billion, maybe $1.2, $1.3 billion. But to ask for such a high budget to where it's like now you have to make $2 billion just to break even, not even profit. So that means that for this movie to be profitable, it has to be, you might as well say it has to be the highest grossing film of all time, which when you think about that, that's insane. So, like I said, with Avatar, when you look at the success of the Avatar movie, I think that it was a Hollywood machine. It was solely pumped by Hollywood, because even when the first one came out around that time, nobody was talking about the story of itself. Nobody was talking about the characters really. Yeah, the Na'vi tribe, you know, people may have mentioned them, but the only reason why they really mentioned them, to be honest, was because of the design of the characters of itself. There's nothing memorable about the first Avatar film. I remember watching the first Avatar film in theaters and going to sleep halfway through the movie. You know, I am gonna watch it again. I am planning on watching the first one again before I watch this new one, because I don't remember the movie at all like that. But like I said, man, like this movie really harps on its effects. You know, and even, you know, watching the trailers of this new film, I gotta say, yeah, the special effects looks amazing. It looks great. It looks dope. But what else are you giving us? And also, too, when you look at the budget, it's like, did you really need that high of a budget to make the film that you really wanted to make? You know what I mean? Like, if you were to cut this budget down in half, would you still be able to, you know, direct your vision or put this movie out in the way that you exactly wanted to with a much less budget? And I would say, yeah. Now, I'm not a budget expert. I'm not an expert on special effects and what kind of money it takes to make a groundbreaking, visually appealing movie like Avatar. I'm not, you know, I'm not on that front. You know what I mean? I'm not an expert or anything like that. But I'm just saying, like, if they would have cut this budget down in half, I think they would have been able to make a visually, a really great and visually appealing movie with a hopefully potentially strong story. But when you set the budget so high, like I said, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I can't see this film making $2 billion because, like I said, when you look at the Avatar franchise as a whole, I think this movie took a little bit too long to release. This movie has been in development for over 10 years. This movie should have came out 3-4 years ago. But this movie is just the second film. The sequel of this film is just now coming out. And the first one came out over 10 years ago. You're talking about 13 years. And I don't think that the anticipation and the hype for this movie is really there either. And that's another thing too, because when you look around, I guess you could say the movie spaces, you know, within social media, YouTube, as far as like I'm concerned, I'm not seeing anybody hype for this movie. I'm not seeing anybody talk about this movie really like that at all. Now, I guess, of course, that will change once we get closer to the movie's release. But as far as like right now, this movie is like 3 weeks out and there's no hype around it. There's nothing surrounding this movie. People are still talking about like Black Panther. People are still talking about that movie. And that movie's been out for what? Almost 3 weeks now. Everybody's talking about other films except for this one. So, like I said before, I know that, you know, the talks and the hypes of this movie will ramp up as we get closer to the release date. But even still, man, I don't think it's going to ramp up to the point to where this movie is going to help make this movie $2 billion. I don't think that the talks and the hype surrounding this movie, even if it does amp up, you know, a few weeks later as we get closer to the release, I don't even think it will be enough for this movie to make $2 billion. I don't think the hype and the talks around this movie will like ramp up to the point to where, yeah, everybody's going to rush out to see it because, you know, it's, you know, that's the hype. That's the talk of the town. I just don't see it, man. So I guess to wrap up, man, I think Avatar is really setting itself up for failure, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Because like I said, man, like I don't think that they needed this high of a budget to make this film work. They could have probably cut the budget down in half and it would have still been a visually great movie. Because technology now compared to back in, you know, the production days of when they made the first Avatar is so more advanced to where I think that you could probably cut some corners here and there and still, you know, be on par with the first film as far as like visual effects go. I don't think this film needed that high of a budget. Now, like I said, I could be wrong. They may be using some groundbreaking technology in this film that demands a high budget. But from my perspective, from the way I'm looking at it, I really believe that they could have made this film a lot cheaper. And it's going to be very telling when this movie comes out and seeing everybody's reactions to it. Like I said, I don't know what this movie is going to do. I don't know how it's going to be received amongst the audience, amongst the fans. For some reason, I just feel like this movie is going to be a letdown. I just feel like this movie is going to be a disappointment. It has a lot going against it, man. It really has a lot going against it. Like I said, compared to other films in the top 10, highest grossing box office films of all time, this movie doesn't have anything else going for it but the special effects. And even fans of the movie, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure that there are true fans of, Avatar that really likes it for its character and its story and not just the special effects. But I think that when you compare it to other films, those fans are very few compared to other films. I could be wrong. They may be a big fan base for Avatar that's really into the Na'vi tribe and really into the lore of Avatar and the whole world of Avatar. But from what I see, I just don't see that. Most people, when they think of Avatar, they just think of the special effects and maybe the Na'vi tribe. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is just, okay, maybe mediocre at best. Nobody talks about the story. Nobody talks about the characters. Nobody talks about the plot. Nobody talks about the overall world of Avatar and Pandora and all of that. Nobody really gets in deep, talking about Avatar. So this movie has a lot going against it. And for you to make this big, grand, epic movie on such a high budget to where you have to make $2 billion just to break even. I don't know what James Cameron was thinking. I really don't know. And I really believe that Hollywood, I don't know what they're seeing with the number. I don't know. I think that their whole, when they analyze the numbers, when they look at, okay, how much the first one made, I really think that they're looking at it through a specific lens and they're not taking a deeper look and really okay, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's actually see, let's analyze this and see, okay, where did all this money come from? Why do people like this film? So to close, man, I just believe that Avatar is setting itself up for failure. This is not a film franchise that's like I said, other than the special effects, it's not that memorable of a movie. I'm sorry. It's really not. And for you to make this movie on such a high budget, man, it's just setting itself up for failure. And like I said before, coming out as late as now when the sequel should have been out years ago, I don't know, man. I really don't know. It'd be very interesting to see how special, if anything, if it does make $2 billion, the special effects better be something that it's beyond this world. If everything else fails, the only thing that could save this movie and it could make $2 billion, the only thing that I could see, if everything else fails within this movie, it better have some goddamn groundbreaking special effects to where it's almost unachievable to reach the quality of the effects of this film. This film better have that going for it. So like I said, it's a tall order stacked up against this movie, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. It's going to be very interesting to see people's first reactions to this film once, we get closer to the release date and once, the premieres happen and all of that. It'll be very interesting to see. I'm definitely going to be paying attention to this movie as it gets closer to release date. Like I said, I am going to see this movie when it comes out. And I'm going to give my full on review. I know it's 3 hours long, so I'm prepared for the marathon, man. I just hope that I don't fall asleep. So with that being said, man, I'm going to just draw this video to a close. And till my next one, man, we out.